Okay, just 1 second here. Okay, so it's we're in the period of time where we're getting ready for Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, of course, and we all prepare in our own way to make sure we're ready for the big day. And one way to do that is to study the liturgy, and in our case today, we'll be studying a little bit the Torah reading, but really more the character of Sara, who is the major character, if you will, in the Torah reading. So I think I'm having a technical difficulty here. Hold on. Okay, I'm just gonna start. Okay, here we go. Welcome everybody to Heroes of the High Holidays. This is our series discussing biblical characters that make an appearance in the davening or the Torah reading of the Chagim, of Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippurim. Again, as we often do, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to type it into the chat box, either to everyone or just to me. If it's a question or a comment, I'm happy to share it. Also, you could use the raise hand function, which is available on Zoom if you have any questions. I know a lot of people are on here who are not do not have their cameras on, but I always encourage people to put their camera on if they can. Just makes the whole experience more present and more real and easier to interact. So if you're comfortable with that, please feel free to put your camera on. Okay. Thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's talk about Sara. Right, on the first day of Rosh Hashana, we read. This is the beginning of the Torah reading. V'Hashem pakad et Sara kasher amar. Vayas Hashem l'Sara kasher diber. V'tahar v'telet Sara la'Avraham ben l'zikunav. La'moed asher diber oto Elokim. The Lord took note of Sara. Often this is translated as the Lord remembered Sara, as he had promised, and the Lord did for Sara as he had spoken. Sara conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken. Remember, if you may remember this, God visited Abraham in his tent. First, the three visitors were there, right? 3 angels were there, and one of them told Sara that she was going to have a baby, and she was shocked and surprised that she was going to have a baby. And then we're told a little bit later that just as God had promised, she in fact, Vatahar Vateled, she conceived and she bore a son, and we're talking about Yitzchak. Okay, so the question is, we'll start this, see if anyone wants to take a stab at this. Why do we read this section on Rosh Hashana? Jonathan Sachs in his Rosh Hashana Machzor, do I have it here? Yeah, Jonathan Sachs, in his Rosh Hashana Machzor, asks the question. He puts it really well when asking why we read this. He says as follows: the Torah readings for the first day of Rosh Hashana form an eloquent pair of witnesses. It says Rosh Hashana is the anniversary of creation. Hayom Harat Olam, right? We say in Tefillah, today the world was born. We would surely have expected the Torah reading to be from the opening of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. And so that's his question. Why do we, instead of reading about the creation of the world, which matches up perfectly with the theme of the day, because Rosh Hashanah is the day in which the world was created. Why instead do we read about Sarah? So anyone want to take a stab at that, either in the chat, or you could raise your virtual hand or raise your real hand? Any takers? Okay, Chana.
I think it's like the world was created on Rosh Hashanah. That's when the Jewish people, I compare it to the creation of the Jewish people. Abraham was the first Jew that recognized God as Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He is the beginning of the Jewish nation. So that's a beginning, the beginning of the world and the beginning of the Jewish nation. So Abraham, Yitzchak.
Okay, but the truth is, it's not the beginning of the Jewish nation. Well, let's put it this way. It's the creation, it's more universal than that. It is the beginning on some level of the Jewish nation, but it's really the beginning of the whole world. The Jewish people were not created on Rosh Hashanah. We could argue that we were created on Pesach, right, when we left Mitzrayim, or we were created on Shavuot when we stood at Har Sinai and received the Torah. But there's nothing specific. It's interesting because we think of Rosh Hashanah is, well, this is going to sound silly. It's very Jewish. Of course it's very Jewish, right? Because it's a Jewish holiday, right? But Rosh Hashanah is really universal. It's Hayom Harat Olam, we say in the Tefillot. So that's why Rabbi Sachs is asked this question.
But this is the belief of the Jewish people, not of the Gentiles.
No, it's not. It's the beginning of the world. Hayom Harat Olam.
Right.
The world was created on Rosh Hashanah, not the Jewish people. The Jewish people were not created on Rosh Hashanah. Adam and Chava were created on Rosh Hashanah. That is not the Jewish people. There's a very universal character, and I'll give you another example of this in one of the most well-known tefillot that we have in the Rosh Hashanah davening. It also appears in the Yom Kippur davening, but it's Unetana Tokef. We say, V'chol ba'ei olam ya'avrun lefanecha kivnei maron. Everyone in the entire world passes before God on Rosh Hashanah like sheep being counted. Kivnei maron v'chol ba'ei olam. So this is the force of Rabbi Sachs's question. So why are we reading about Sarah? So he has an interesting answer. I'll share with you perhaps a little bit later. But let's look first at the Gemara, and then we'll look first at Midrash, and then we'll try to expand it a little bit beyond. So the Gemara tells us why we read this Torah reading on Rosh Hashanah by telling us the following. In Masechet Rosh Hashanah, in the tractate that deals with Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah nifkeda Sara, Rachel, v'Chana. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Chana were revisited by God and conceived children. Right, so we read about Sarah on Rosh Hashanah because it's the anniversary of her being able to have a child. The Gemara asks, Mi Nalan, how do we know this? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Itya Pekida, Itya Zechira. The Gemara here provides what's called a Gezerat Shaveh, a verbal analogy between similar words used in different contexts. From where do we derive this? Rabbi Elazar said this is derived by means of a verbal analogy between one instance of the term Pikida, Hashem pakad et Sarah, he visited Sarah, and another instance of the term revisited. And by means of a verbal analogy between one instant of the word remember, zechira, and another word remembering. So where are these different places? Ketiv birachel, vayiskor Elohim et Rachel. Uktiv b'chana, vayiskira Hashem. When it comes to Rachel, it says God remembered her. It's also written the same thing about Chana, and God remembered her. And the meaning of these instances of the term remembering is derived from another instance of the term remembering with regard to Rosh Hashanah. V'itya zichira Rosh Hashana dichtiv Shabbaton zichron teruah. So since we have the words that God remembered Rachel and God remembered Chana, and Rosh Hashanah is called Shabbaton Zichron Teruah, the day of remembering of the shofar blast. This verbal analogy is sort of the traditional understanding of that Sarah was remembered on Rosh Hashanah, and the meaning of the instance of the term revisiting is derived from another instance of the term revisiting. It is written about Chana, and the Lord revisited Chana, and is written about Sarah, and the Lord revisited Sarah. So since there's this overlap between Chana and Sarah, and the word Pekidah and the word Zechirah, we derived that just as Chana was revisited on Rosh Hashanah, so too Sara was revisited on Rosh Hashanah. This is the traditional explanation of why it is that we read about Sarah and her conceiving on Rosh Hashanah. In fact, we have a piyut. A piyut is a liturgical poem, which a large part of the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening, the reason why the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening is very long, is largely because of these piyutim. Largely because of these liturgical poems that are added into the repetition of the Amidah, most of them, that in beautiful poetic language teach us the themes of the day, remind us of the themes of the day, and explain the themes of the day. And there is an entire piyut that is dedicated to this story, right? To Sarah conceiving on Rosh Hashanah. So this is I broke it up into half. Broke it in half. Let's just read a couple of the lines. It starts in Hebrew. Aim asher b'tzedek nityashna. This is such powerful language. Our matriarch who aged in righteousness. Now, what does that mean? She aged in righteousness. As she's getting older and older and older, and she's not having children, she maintains her what the Piyut calls her tzidkut, right? She maintains her righteousness. She never complains. She never loses faith. Our measure who aged in righteousness, though she had lost hope, she was finally granted fecundity. And he who brought her forth remembered her on Rosh Hashanah. That's directly from the Talmud that we studied. It was this very day when she said, behold, I am condemned to remain wretched as my youth comes to an end. You sealed her judgment righteously, so she would not resort to reclusion. Just as she was informed by your messengers, so did it come to pass. She made haste to entreat the pure one, but her request was granted before she began to pray. So this is a beautiful description and illustration of Sarah, that as she sees, like the emotion here is high emotion. As she, I was thinking about what images this brings up. It's like the hourglass, right? As the sand in the hourglass is running out, and Sarah is realizing that I just have no more time left. I'm just physiologically, I'm unable to bear children. Just at that last moment, right? God comes to her and remembers her. All who heard of her joy laughed and rejoiced, for all childless women did bloom, though their time had passed, and all called out to her, the mother of sons is joyous. Right now we add midrashic interpretation that not only was Sarah remembered on that day, and Rachel and Hannah, but all women who were unable to conceive on that day, they were granted the ability to conceive. She found her peace, though she had already begun to lose the freshness of youth, and her beauty was renewed like an eagle, as women of noble birth rejoiced in her company. Right? And so it's just a beautiful ode to what happened. The woman of bitter spirit who had been childless was healed after 90 years when God rewarded her, and she sent forth shoots that neither disappointed nor deceived. Not only did she have children, but she had Yitzchak, right? Right? She had shoots that neither disappointed nor deceived. Turn your eyes to the offspring, our ancestors who were born on this day, and recall the three barren women, right, from the Talmud, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah, whose prayers were answered this day. And by their merit, may those who await you be vindicated, O awesome one. Right? It ends with Ayom, like God is. This is. There are different ways that we talk about God. Here we're talking about God as Ayom. He's awesome. This was an awesome miracle. This was a universal miracle. Women all over the world were able to have babies. God is awesome. Now, this is a beautiful tribute to God and to Sarah, and it's supposed to. It seems like it's supposed to give the reader faith, right? And this, I think, points to another reason why we read this on Rosh Hashana, right? We say it at the end, and recall the women whose prayers were answered on this day, and by their merit may those who await you be vindicated. We want to take this beyond the Sarah story, and we're hoping that the Sarah story gives us the good fortune of being vindicated by God, right? That we will be vindicated. Whatever it is that we need on Rosh Hashanah, just like Sarah and Rachel and Hannah were granted that on Rosh Hashanah, we should also be granted whatever it is that we want on Rosh Hashanah. It's so beautiful that it's especially a shame this year because many congregations, including, will be cutting out the piyutim because we have to save time so we could have two services and we don't want to keep people inside for that long. But even on a regular year, we don't necessarily read the English so much, and the piyutim are often skipped anyway. But if you spend some time reading them, you really get a sense of one of the themes, the characters of the day. And this is number one. That it's not just a day of Sarah being remembered and being able to have a child. It's a day of hope in general. At least it's a day of hoping for hope in general. And we try to expand it. I certainly understand that this piyut actually, on the other hand, can be painful for some women and families on Rosh Hashanah, because there are every year on Rosh Hashanah there are women and families sitting in shul who are struggling with infertility and are unable to conceive and have children. And hearing about Rachel's joy and that everyone else on that day was able to, maybe gives people hope and faith, but I'm sure is also a painful reminder. So maybe that's why it's skipped. But I'm seeing it now also as just as a piyut that's supposed to give us a sense of what the day is. So when we read Vashem Pakad et Sara, right, that God remembered Sarah, I think what this piyut, at least the end of this piyut, is asking us to do is that, God remembering Sarah, who conceived in Rosh Hashanah, that's only one thing that God could do. But God could do so many other things, right? God could vindicate and grant our wishes in so many other ways on Rosh Hashanah. And perhaps the Torah reading is supposed to sort of help us focus on that, so that when it comes time for more tefillah, for more prayer, we're able to really bear down and focus on what we're looking for. And Sarah is a quintessential character in the Bible of someone who had lost hope, right? And we know that when she was told that she was going to have a baby, what did she do?
He laughed.
She laughed. She thought it was a joke, right? She had basically lost hope, and so she's an example of someone who had lost hope, so much so that when an angel of God tells her there is hope, she doesn't believe the angel, and God's a little annoyed by that. But nonetheless, Sarah is a story of hope, and perhaps that's why we read about it on Rosh Hashanah. Sort of expanding a little bit beyond the Gemara. It's not just about her being remembered; it's about more of a general story of hope. And we don't always think of Rosh Hashanah that way. Sometimes we think of Rosh Hashanah as it's scary, it's judgment, it's repentance, but this gives it a little bit of a different flavor. Okay.
Keep it.
Question?
please keep the Hebrew text of the.
Pardon me?
I said, please keep the Hebrew piyut on, so I can.
I have to move to the. I have
Yeah.
to move to the next source. I'll send you the whole source book, Shula.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll send it to you. Yeah. Okay. Let's
Rabbi.
go to. Yes.
Hayom Harat Olam, it's not like came from the word herayon, pregnant, like pregnant.
Right.
So I always knew that Harat Olam, it's the time that Hashem thought to create the world, the people in the world, that it started on Tishrei and it's born on Pesach, and the people were in Pesach, something like this.
There are different accounts of it, but one account is that Adam and Chava were created on Rosh Hashana, and so in that case, Hayom Harat Olam would actually refer to, to creation and birth. Yeah, it would be Herayon. But you're right. There are different accounts of it. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Here's an interesting midrash, also dealing with Sarah. We know that right after Sarah gives birth to Yitzchak, after all that time, and she feels that it's a miracle. She has this child. Abraham is told by God to then bring the child as a sacrifice, Akedat Yitzchak. And there's this incredible midrash that says the following: when Abraham returned from Mount Moriah in peace, meaning he had successfully done what God asked him to do, the anger of Samael, who's like a bad angel, was kindled, for he saw that the desire of his heart to frustrate the offering of our father Abraham had not been realized. There are all sorts of midrashim that talk about all types of hurdles that Samael, that this bad angel put in front of Abraham on his way to Akedat Yitzchak to try to convince him not to do it. And he failed. And so now he's upset because he failed. And he realized that Avram's faith is so strong. What did he do? He went and said to Sarah, "Hast thou not heard what has happened in the world?" She said to him, "No." He said to her, "Thy husband Abraham has taken thy son Isaac and slain him and offered him up as a burnt offering upon the altar." She began to weep and to cry aloud 3 times, corresponding to the 3 sustained notes of the shofar. And she gave forth 3 howlings, corresponding to the 3 disconnected notes of the shofar, and her soul fled and she died. And maybe because right after this, right after in the Torah, right after the Akedah, we read Chaye Sarah, she died and Abraham has to bury her. And so the Midrash tries to connect the dots. What's the connection between Akedat Yitzchak and Sarah dying? And this is the connection, right? This is just cruel. It's cruelty by this angel, because the angel going to gain, in this case, the angel wasn't going to win Abraham, beat Abraham at this point. And the language at the end of the Midrash is right? The boy cried, and then she starts to cry, and the word yililot is the one of the biblical or Talmudic words used for the sounds of one of the sounds of the shofar. So there's yililot and there's tkiot, right? We have different sounds. We have the quick one, right? We have the shorter ones, different sounds of the shofar, and that's the sound that Sarah made, and she died. So here we have a different connection to Rosh Hashana, right? The first connection to Rosh Hashana is at the day of hope, right? Sarah is remembered and everyone else is remembered, and we're asking that God remember us on that day, and we try to see it as a hopeful day. And then we have here the words of the shofar are tears, right? These are the shofar are sounds of wailing and crying, and they actually end up leading to Sarah's death. So here we get a different picture of the Sarah we're talking about. Here, this is a Sarah who gave her life.
Yeah, but the traditional thought is that Tkiya is more hopeful and optimism.
Yeah, not so much in this midrash though. That's true.
Never.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is a midrash that connects Sarah to Rosh Hashanah in the sense that she didn't die on Rosh Hashanah, but the sounds of the shofar represent the sounds of her crying, the sounds of Yitzchak's crying, the sounds of her crying, the sound of her sadness, of her anguish, almost as she has no hope. And I actually find both of these midrashim true. I think different people come to Rosh Hashanah feeling differently. I think some people come to Rosh Hashanah feeling full of hope. And I think some people come to Rosh Hashanah in complete despair. Right? I remember once I spoke about this when we had the last davening at UOS before we tore the building down. I used to go into the sanctuary on Erev Rosh Hashanah and on Erev Yom Kippur. I used to stand at the front of the bima in front of the Aron Kodesh, and I would look at the empty sanctuary, and I sort of know where everyone sits, and I would think to myself, well, that seat's going to be empty because that person died this year, and that seat's going to have someone else in it because this person got married this year or had a child this year, and that seat's going to be empty because this person's in the hospital. Right? So there are some people who come to Shul on Rosh Hashanah and they know that this is going to be their last Rosh Hashanah. And there are some people who come to Rosh Hashanah and say, this is going to be the best year of my life. My wife is pregnant. My daughter is pregnant. I'm engaged. I'm young. I just got a new job. I think this Rosh Hashanah is going to be a little hard for a lot of people, a lot of insecurity. So I think both of these midrashim, they speak to different ways that people feel on Rosh Hashanah. Some people feel it's a great hope, and some people are feeling heavier. And so, like Shula said, for some people, the sound of the shofar is the sound of victory, right? When you win a war, you sound a horn that you're victorious. But for some people, the shofar is crying, and
it's we believe that like the force of the Tkiya sort of like open the sky and then let all our wishes go directly.
We hope. So I know that you're coming to Shul this Rosh Hashanah full of hope. Yes. Sarah, number one. That's good.
No choice.
That's good. But I think it's important for us to realize that not everyone comes that way to Rosh Hashanah. Some people come feeling differently. Maybe, and some people on the first day of Rosh Hashanah feel one way, and the second day of Rosh Hashanah feel another way. But I think this midrash gives us a little bit of a different sense than how we view Sarah's connection to Rosh Hashanah, because the reading of the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and the truth is actually this just occurred to me now, right? The reading of the first day of Rosh Hashanah is this one. Hashem pakad et Sara. God remembered Sarah. That is the day that's full of hope. And what's the reading for the second day of Rosh Hashanah?
I don't know.
Akedat Yitzchak.
Oh.
The binding of Isaac. Right? The second day, where am I here? Yeah, the second day. Vahi achar hadivrem ha'elav Elohim nisa et Avraham vayomer elav Avraham yomer neni Take your son and bring him up as a sacrifice. Now it's true, he doesn't get sacrificed, but this story of how Sarah met her end is part of that story. So on the first day, it's the story of hope. On the second day, it's the story of a near miss. It's a very different feel. Okay, I want to look at one other thing, which gives us another way to look at Sarah's connection to Rosh Hashana. There's this really interesting Gemara in Masechet Bava Kama that says, "Ve'ezahu matbeya shel Avraham Avinu, zakein uzekena mitzad echad, ubachur ubetula mitzad acher." This is such an evocative Gemara. Apparently, there was a coin in the time of Abraham. This is a midrash. It doesn't make a difference if there was really a coin or not. The rabbis are giving us this image to teach us something. What was on the coin of Abraham? So the Gemara says on one side was the image of an old man and an old woman. And on the other side, there was a picture of a young man and a young woman. Presumably, on one side, the likeness of Abraham and Sarah as an old couple. And on the other side, the likeness of Abraham and Sarah as a young couple. What's going on here? So I'll share with you two things, one outside and the other inside. The first that I'll share outside comes from Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, who's one of the great post-World War II rabbis. He's actually a Holocaust survivor, made his way to Switzerland, survived the war, and then had a small yeshiva in Switzerland, wrote many responsa, really a very fascinating thinker. He has an essay on Matbeya Shel Avraham Avinu, on the coin of Avraham Avinu. And he goes through an essay trying to understand what does it mean that the coin on one side had a young couple and the other side had an older couple. And he says, usually we think that youth and maturity are mutually exclusive, right? The young people are the go-getters, they're the dreamers, they throw caution to the wind, they have all the great ideas, right? They're the revolutionaries, right? We never see old revolutionaries, right? They're the revolutionaries, they're the ones who are going to change the world. And the old people, they're more methodical, they're more thoughtful, they have the
accomplished.
They have the benefit of experience to be more realistic, while the young people are idealistic. And we often think that those things are mutually exclusive. And so here the Gemara is saying, not when it came to Adam and Sarah. It was one coin, and on one side, they were the old, thoughtful, experienced, knowledgeable couple. On the other side, they were the revolutionary, ideological, young power couple. And they always knew which side of the coin to sort of use in their life. Right? As opposed to the rest of us, we don't get to be young and old at the same time. We get to be young and make a lot of mistakes. And then when we're old, we get to laugh at ourselves and realize all the mistakes that we made. Right? But not Avraham and Sarah. When they were young, they had the wisdom also of they had the fire in them, but the wisdom. And when they were old, they had the wisdom, but they also had the ideological power and force and fire in the belly, so to speak. They weren't burnt out yet. Okay, so that's one idea. I think it's a beautiful idea because it's actually a nice Rosh Hashana idea too, in the sense that Rosh Hashana is about renewal, right? So it gives us a sense of being able to remake ourselves, and that's the theme I want to build on. In a series of essays, Rabbi Ezra Bick, who is a teacher in Yeshivat Har Etzion in Alon Shvut in Israel, there's a series that deals with Agadata, right, the non-halachic parts of the Talmud, like the one that we just saw, right? There's nothing halachic about the story of the coin, but it's there to teach us a lesson. And he has this beautiful essay, and I just want to share with you a few tidbits of it. So perfect for Rosh Hashanah. And I think that's one of the reasons why we read about Sarah, the renewal of her physical self, being able to conceive a child, um, is not just about physical renewal. There's her physical, just like I said before, that her ability to have a child is, we should expand that and think about hopefulness in general. The physiological renewal that she experienced should also give us the opportunity or lead us to thinking about renewal in a much broader sense. And here's what Rabbi Bick says. Abraham and of course Sarah as well were literally remade, rejuvenated. It is not Yitzchak who is the youth, but Abraham himself, or Sarah. This is stated explicitly by Sarah herself when wondering about the promise of the visiting angels after being worn out. Shall I experience youth? Remember, both Abraham and Sarah are given new names at the Brit Ben Abitarim. In order for them to have children in the manner of Rashi's interpretation, they have to be rejuvenated themselves, made young and fresh again. So for Rav Bick, the coin goes in a certain direction. Abraham and Sarah are old, but this story is a story of them becoming young again, not in age, but in attitude, and not attitude that now they're going to be careless, right? But just the general idea of being renewed and having renewed excitement and a renewed vigor in one's life. The interpretation serves, I think, better as a symbol of Abraham's life in a manner that fits my understanding of the monitin. That's the name of the coin. It is indeed important that Abraham and Sarah were succeeded by Yitzchak and Rivka, but it is the fact, but is that fact the defining symbol of their lives? I am suggesting that the symbol of their lives is rejuvenation and revolution. This is so powerful and actually goes to the very concern that I had about this reading to begin with, that it may be depressing for some people who cannot have children. And Rabbi Bick is saying something, and I'm not sure if I would, this is dicey, but it's powerful. He says, Abraham and Sarah should not be defined by their children. They should be defined by their own ability of renewal and rejuvenation. We should be defined by our own actions, our own tshuva. So I think this is important in two ways. It's important for people who do not have children. We should try to create a community where people are not only celebrated because of their children, but are celebrated because of who they are and their ability to constantly rejuvenate and give and give and give. And it's also just in terms of our own selves, right? Sometimes people, children don't turn out exactly the way they wanted them to. That never happens in a Jewish family, of course, right? Sometimes it doesn't happen the way we want it to. And then parents begin to second guess themselves. What am I if not my children? And on Rosh Hashana, these are the thoughts that people have. Right? On Rosh Hashana, people begin to reconsider and rethink their lives and to reflect on the life that they have built and what have I done, my child? I have this problem, I have that problem. And here they're saying, it's true, Yitzchak and Rivka are important, but that's not the defining symbol of our lives. I am suggesting that the symbol of their lives is rejuvenation and revolution. By separating themselves from the existing culture, they reinvented themselves, in a sense began creation itself anew. The idea which would have interested Chazal, the rabbis, in this metaphor, and remember this Midrash is not really giving us shock, it's not the straightforward understanding in some instance of Abraham's life, is what this says about Judaism itself, that it is a new recreation of man, that it divorces one from the past and allows a fresh start on a new way, that time begin anew on the day that Abraham sets out on his journey. And I would argue that that's part of the reason why we read about Sarah, right? It's a brand new life for her. She's a mother. She's 90 years old, and now she's a mother. She's almost starting from scratch. And we see she goes through a lot of ups and downs with raising Yitzchak, right? And this is a beautiful line. It's what it's, this coin image Rabbi Bick is saying it's not really about Abraham and Sarah, it's about Judaism. And Judaism is about recreation. And the fact that Sarah had it at 90 is supposed to teach us that it's never too late. There's never, when we stop breathing, then it's too late. Right? By the way, the Pirkei Avot says that we should repent the day before we die. Challenge is, we normally don't know the day before we die. It's the whole point. That's the whole point. Right? It's every single day. Every single day. Abraham sets on his journey. Abraham's discovery of God is the meaning of his life. And Chazal say that this discovery is rejuvenation. Abraham is not really old at all. He is a youth, discovering a totally new way of understanding the world he marvels about. To use the phrase introduced in the Midrash we saw several weeks ago, the dew of your youth is yours. And so while Rabbi Bick is looking at the coin as Abraham's story and the beginning of Abraham's story, the fact that Sarah is on the coin, I'm taking the license to also look at the coin as a commentary on Sarah's story, right? That ability to see the old Sarah on one side of the coin and flip it over and see the new Sarah is a reminder that Sarah got renewed, and we can also on Rosh Hashana, and we should never lose hope. We should never lose faith in ourselves, and we should never lose faith in our loved ones, and we should not define ourselves by others, even the ones that we raised. It's nice to do that when everything works out okay, but it doesn't always make everyone happy, right? And the idea, as he said, is Judaism is all about recreation, revolution, and rejuvenation. And that could be why we read about Sarah giving birth or conceiving on Rosh Hashana. So those are three ideas about Sarah. The first idea we read about her is about hope. That she had lost hope, very close to losing hope, as we read in the Piyut, and then just keherifying, like in the blink of an eye, there's hope again, and we should all pray for that hope on Rosh Hashana. We also leave space on Rosh Hashana for those people who feel more like crying than being hopeful, and that's also the Sarah story. The second day of Rosh Hashana, the Akedat Yitzchak, when the devil, so to speak, tricks her and causes her to die, and we're given the image of the sound, not the image, that we're told of the sounds of the shofar that she made with her crying, to remind us that some people are crying on Rosh Hashana, like Sarah cried when she heard about Akedat Yitzchak. And the third idea, a little bit related to the first idea, but a little bit broader, is that this notion of the coin, right, of Sarah being able to have a baby so late in life, is again an aspect of her life, but also a comment on Judaism, right? If we want to say, if Judaism began with Abraham and Sarah being able to have another generation, then that Judaism began with an act of complete rejuvenation, revolution, and a rejection of what had come in the past, and a rejection of nature even, because Sarah didn't think she was going to be able to do it. So we read about Sarah as a way to remind ourselves what it means to be Jewish, to always be able to remake ourselves, and never to feel that it's out of my hands, I can't do it, it's too difficult. It's true that Sarah had divine help. But our rabbis tell us, haba l'taher misayim lo, that people who come to purify themselves, God helps them. And we certainly hope that that's true. So that is Heroes of the High Holidays -- 1, a little bit about Sarah and what her life story can teach us, and about what the inclusion of those two stories of Akedat Yitzchak and her becoming pregnant, what lessons they give us, and what things they give us to think about on Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to stop the share. If anyone has a question or a comment, you could put it in the chat room, or you could raise your virtual hand or raise your real hand. Happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And if there are no questions or comments, I will say Laila Tov
Thank
to
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Rabbi. It
Thank
was
you
very interesting.
for joining. Thank you, Chana, for your comments earlier. Thank you for joining, everyone. It's really nice to see you all and spend some time. We'll be back next week, the same time. Who is the next week? The topic is Chana. Also, we learned about Chana, but we're going to learn. So, right, Chana is for next week, and then after that, we'll learn about Aaron the Kohen Gadol. So I look forward to seeing you. If you could join again, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Really great to spend some time with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Laila Tov.
Rabbi.
Laila
Thank you,
Tov.
Rabbi. Great
Thank
class.
you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
thank you.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.